Hi, everyone. Welcome to Video Games Real Talk with Alexander Fernandez and Stefan Baier. We have a great show for you today, bringing in our, transatlantic cousins in order to discuss a fantastic project that we all participated on, the Balenciaga project, which all of you guys have been asking about. So joining us today is Simon Windsor and Sallyann Houghton. How are you all doing?
Great.
Hey, Alex. Great. Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. And of course, we have Stefan here. We can't forget him. Stefan, how you doing, man?
Hey, doing good. Hello.
Simon, let's start with you. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah. Hi, guys. Great to join you today. I'm Simon Windsor, co-founder and joint managing director at Dimension. Dimension is a studio. We have several studios that specialize in volumetric content and virtual production in the XR space. So I head up a team of about 55 people working primarily across entertainment and fashion.
Awesome. Sallyann, please let us know. What do you do?
Wow. I don't have a short answer for that because I'm obviously awesome and do so many things. But no, I work at Epic Games and I'm located when we're all located places, I'm located at the Epic Games London Innovation Lab. And I look after our relationships with the fashion industry and help everyone understand game engine technology and utilize game engine technology and realize their dreams with game engine technology.
That is super cool. And obviously, everyone, Stefan, but Stefan, you're representing Streamline here today. So who are you and what do you do?
So I'm one of the co-founders of Streamline Media Group. Pretty much have become responsible for all the products and sort of major productions and partnerships at the studio. So this means that in some form or another, I tend to be involved in all of our long-term partnerships and high-stakes productions. So while I wasn't hands-on on the Balenciaga project directly, I did help put together the deal essentially, and then put the team together that then executed on it. So I would usually see, over there, I can see people really working very hard on this particular project. So Alex essentially goes out there and builds up the partnerships, and then I have to make sure it happens as intended.
It sounds like you clean up my mess. That's what that just sounded like right there. Like, poor you. Go out there, meet
like
rando
that, but,
people. Yeah, I figure. So let's get into it. This project, Balenciaga's Afterworld, The Age of Tomorrow, this is a project that, at least I'll be honest from my end, I would have never thought was going to happen. And all of a sudden happened, but happened in a way that surprised me. Even, I guess, the most, can I say, the most pessimistic or sarcastic way of thinking, because in the end, historically speaking, brands and digital have had a type of relationship where, either it's done too fast or it's done too slow or it's not relevant. But then all of a sudden you get this project that really hits across all cylinders, across every aspect of the zeitgeist, as well as technology, as well as the time and place. And then it blows up and becomes this huge thing. So I want to ask each one of you your perceptions of this. How do you see what this project has done, what it means? And, how do you look at it? Just, obviously from your respective areas and, of course, as a bridge into the metaverse. So, Simon, I mean, you guys had the real responsibility of taking out the vehicle, going out and interacting with the models. I mean, tell us about that, and of course, what this was like for in terms of your guys' participation.
Yeah, sure thing. So I mean, like you say, timing is crucial in innovation. And I think there's no doubt that Balenciaga was a high-tech production across the board, right, in terms of all the technologies which were being used and how they were being used. Just on the volumetric capture side, I think, it's something like 7 years of R&D which went into the Microsoft system that powers the volumetric. Significant investments have been made into, the mobile capture stage. That in itself is an innovation, and a couple of years ago wouldn't have been possible. We worked closely with other partners, Nikon and Mark Roberts Motion Capture to help bring that truck to life, and that made the possibility of shooting in Paris during lockdown. I think when we filmed, Paris had just gone into lockdown, and then the same happened in London whilst our team were out there. So we were shooting in very unusual times. We had a condensed shoot window. The technology itself is only recently been tested to a point where you can get the right level of results, meaning that we could film the 50 models at 4K, getting the right texture resolutions and the finished look that Balenciaga were comfortable with and happy to sign off on. And then the processing of that volume of data and the work involved there. It was a slick production process and schedule, but the technologies that came together just on the volumetric side to help make that happen, and the way in which it had to happen. I mean, everyone was really kind of pushing the envelope forward and riding on a lot of innovation and investment in technology over the past 10 years. It made that possible. So yeah, timing was key. And from Balenciaga's perspective, fashion brands have long created their own conceptual story worlds, right? But this was a prime example of how the physical and virtual and digital can come together to create this fashion metaverse. And then the idea of what Balenciaga world could look like. And of course, volumetric was just one component in the mix with the production that you guys are working on.
So Simon, let me just ask one follow-up question. You guys have I love to call it the mystery machine. You have this van that literally I mean, this is amazing. And honestly, I would ask anyone listening, you need to go to the Dimensions website and check this out. I mean, you guys got this vehicle that literally is the state-of-the-art capture machine. I mean, just how did you guys get the idea of putting all this inside of a van? How did that come up? Just as a side note, real quick, was it just one day? It's yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think like all great ideas, it probably started at the pub.
Thank God.
Ideas.
Yeah,
exactly. That's true. That's true, Sallyann. Yeah. So I think just to explain a bit about the truck quickly, the project name for it when we're developing it was Optical Prime. So a nod to Transformers. Yeah. And the reason is that the truck has to transform to 3 times its traveling footprint. There are OB trucks, you guys will be aware of, that turn up as part of film production, or in the case of F1, they turn up and become expandable hospitality units. Well, in the case of what we've built with Polymotion Stage, which is the name of the truck, it had to. Not only does it have to travel, when it gets to a location, it then has to convert and transform into a large enough space to enable the captures to happen. So there was definitely some technical complexities and challenges we had to solve around. Well, how do you fit everything into a truck, but then make it really optimal so it can just expand, plug in, and be ready to go. So the truck's been designed in such a way that you can, it takes 4 hours to set up once you're on location. So you can be filming the same day. And for anyone who's familiar with volumetric capture, these technologies, the camera systems can be quite temperamental. So that in itself was no mean feat. And I won't take any credit for that, right? Because that's not my bag. The technical team's responsible for doing an amazing job. So yeah, primarily the reason that the truck exists is so that we can go to locations and film the talent. When you're working with principal cast, or you're working with fashion models, or other talent, sometimes they don't want to travel to a fixed location, or they can't. So it's designed to go to music venues, or to sports stadiums, or to film sets, or to fashion shows, and turn up, convert like a transformer, and be ready to shoot.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. And, honestly, a great nod to Optimus Prime. Very, your nerd credibility just shot up through the roof on that one. That is an awesome nod. Unfortunately, my Scooby-Doo reference apparently is lame. So I'm going to go back to yours. Yours is better. Let me ask you a question, Sallyann. And the same thing, you're doing your thing at Epic, and all of a sudden you hear about this project. Mm-hmm. I mean, how what did you think when it came across the desk in terms of what this is?
My gosh, I've spent most of my career working on content with the fashion industry in one way or another. And so when I first heard that this was happening, my first very personal sort of thoughts and feelings were brilliant. This is so exciting. This is so great. The anticipation was too much, and a real willingness and wanting for it to go well. But then once you allow it to register, I felt a bit worried. I felt a bit concerned for you guys, because it is a tall order, and I know that you would not have had enough time, and I know that it would have been an ever changing creative environment, and I know that things potentially wouldn't have been ready on time. I know the industry and the parameters of this type of job, and I also know the feat that you guys had to perform. And so I want to say publicly, well done. It was, and congratulate you guys, because you did such a fantastic job. And then right up to the moments before it launched, I was nervous. I was nervous because I really, for all reasons, for everyone involved, for the label, but also for the industry, and for the gaming industry, for the fashion industry, for the interactive industry. I really wanted this to go well. I really wanted it to be everything that it could be. And it was. So well done, guys. And I wanted it to be a game changer, and it was a game changer. And I really wanted it to be the next sort of reinvention of an expression of a show. And it was. And so I was really relieved. But really, really pleased for everyone. It's a game changer. It's a guiding light now in the industry, and it's really allowed people to see how interactive media is the future of marketing in fashion, but across the board, but especially fashion. They are risk avert, and even though they need newness, they often don't have the time, because they don't give themselves the time to invest in that newness. And the fact that the fact that you could pull this off and it went so well is a real celebration.
No, that's very true. And honestly, that idea of a game changing and really this becoming a gold standard, as we've been hearing from different groups, has been fascinating. And so, Stefan, let me ask you, when we were working on this and you were seeing it come together, to Sallyan's point, it was a bit of a nail biter. I remember internally how insane this was going. And, I don't know, Simon, if you were feeling this, but I know one thing on our end, it was a bit of a little bit of pray and hope everything works. But
Yeah.
Stefan, I mean, what was it for you?
Yeah,
I mean, did you think this was going to be what it was?
We knew, I think, what we were signing up for, and I do remember sort of like early looking at it, like all the different tech components kind of that were required for this, and how it's going to play out, in terms of funny project names. Initially, this was called Model Stranding internally, kind of like Death Stranding, but with models. It visually immediately made sense, right? Because one of the early prototypes was like a photorealistic cave or something with a model in it. So that kind of got everyone, oddly enough, actually quite on page with being like, actually, this is going to look pretty cool when it's done, just because the juxtaposition immediately made sense to people, right? From there on, it was definitely flagged, I think, as a high risk project for us, because you have sort of these three major components, right? Like you've got this kind of like very massive sort of data file structure on one end, like the volumetric captures. It goes to an experimental plugin. It goes into the engine. Then the engine has to handle that, and then it has to run on an AWS cloud and then output somewhere, else through a stream. So that was all pretty intimidating, but at the same time, it's not like the games industry is really built very efficiently sometimes anyway, right? Our team essentially looked to each other like, well, at least you don't have to wait 3 months for the console submission process, because when it works, right? So that was actually a benefit, right? That you essentially did have the opportunity to work on the product until the day off, and we certainly did, and stepped a bit over the line here or there, as we sort of like were polishing the experience. So I think this project is very much a result of a convergence of really very cutting edge modern technology, right? Like streaming something from a server just was about ready to do this. The engine was just about ready to really handle this amount of volume of captures, and everything could be done very fast and very efficiently and very quickly online, right? So all of that kind of came together and allowed this. Like even a year earlier, I think this would have been probably too difficult to do yet, right? So a lot of experimental tech was just kind of happening. So I think it was that all of us, the people on this call included, must have had our ear to the ground in terms of like really where the technology goes, what risks are acceptable to take, and now that the tech is just mature enough, right? It's kind of like, one of the things like you picked up the fruits and they were still green when you had them in your pocket, but by the time you got home, they were essentially ready to eat. That's kind of like you just had to take the risk, make sure everything kind of works. And to be fair, all the parties have been very forthcoming in coordinating content with us, and we'd be on calls with the folks that were working on the plugins on one end, or doing the source files and iterating on it. It was very much an exploration, right? Pushing the Unreal Engine into a corner where normally, like, it doesn't want to go so easily, right? Like, we definitely have pushed it to the place where the volumetric captures would just begin to essentially break and glitch out in very strange ways, right? So where the boundaries are. Okay, like, 4K wall caps at the same time, that, the engine behaves weird. Okay, roll it back a little bit. What about, making them a 2K resolution? Does it work then? And so we get a feeling for what works and how, and that informed the design a little bit, where we then cut some made some design choices to make the experience flow smoothly while unloading in the background. Okay, the wall cap has to go before it breaks the game. But the good thing with Balenciaga was they were actually very forthcoming and quite aware, I think, of technical limitations, and that really made the difference here. And so if that is a sign, as I suppose, for where the future is going with kind of sort of tech aware partners from other industries, a lot of things will be possible.
Sallyann, let me ask you something.
Mhm.
We're using the word game changing, gold standard. Why? What happened? Like, why is the fashion industry and really enterprise all of a sudden like, wait, our attention has been peaked? What's happening?
So I think that there was the piece itself, and we've kind of touched upon all the key areas of success, in that it was the right use of the technology at the right time. Like the ability to do that type of experience has been around for a while. Like video games have been around for a while, but it was the right moment to do it within the fashion industry. It's the right moment to be able to couple it with the volumetric capture, and that be of the highest standard. It was this kind of the right moment to bring all these different elements together, and it was also the right moment for the fashion industry, in that they were ready, they needed new options, they were open to new options. I think that they are quite traditional. They like their practices, it's craft, their culture has always really been sort of there's a lot of value in handcraft, and I think that they found it difficult to see value in a digital world and see value in digital assets. But meanwhile, the digital world has matured, and the look and the feel is more sophisticated, and the accessibility is there. And so all of these things have come together at the right time. And the Balenciaga piece so just laid it all out beautifully, in that it was very familiar to the fashion industry, in that it looked like a fashion piece, it looked like a fashion film, it even in some respects kind of moved like a fashion piece and film. It had all the constituents of an expression of a show, whilst living within this interactive environment, whilst being totally accessible, whilst being the first of. And I think as a result, it was easily consumed by the whole of the fashion industry, and also, the curious gamers who were like, wait a minute, this is my platform, this is my world, this is what we do. And so they kind of came in to have a look. And I think that's why it was successful. And we should all be grateful to the efforts that you guys put in, because it's an amazing proof of concept now. It was a fantastic result for you and for Balenciaga and that collection and that moment. But also, I think it's allowed everyone to see that this is an appropriate direction, and it's allowed them to leverage the success of that show, and also the platform and this digital approach allows them to be unique. It's, fashion loves newness, and it doesn't like to be seen to copy anyone else's idea. And what's amazing in a digital universe, it can be however you see fit. It can look however you see fit. You can have the interactivity of your choice. And so, the Balenciaga piece was presented to them as this new piece that they could then leverage, and they could then make their own, whilst having a whole layer of risk taken away because it's been done to a high level. So that's what makes it so special, and that's why it's a game changer, and that's why everyone is so accepting and excited by it.
Simon, let me ask you the same question. How are you seeing this now with, pre and post Afterworld? What has the world turned into for you?
Yeah, I think Sallyan's nailed it. I mean, Vogue Runway described it as a quantum leap for the fashion industry, and I really believe that Balenciaga is kind of that watershed moment. The bringing together of physical fashion and digital models into Balenciaga's virtual afterworld, and doing that as a web-based 3D game. I think that's got a lot of people talking, a lot of brands, especially in the world of fashion, thinking about what those possibilities are. Bringing 3D worlds onto the web, the use of Unreal Engine, the creative potential, the reach that can be achieved. Bringing the gaming audience and community into it. I mean, these days everyone's a gamer, so it makes so much sense for Balenciaga to be looking at this as a way in which they can engage. The only limit to that is our imagination. We can break the laws of physics. Brands can create interactive playgrounds, to immerse people, and this can supercharge the ways in which fashion and retail brands can get creative and crucially make the experience of fashion more entertaining for audiences. So that's what Balenciaga are exploring with Afterworld, and I think that's why it's got the buzz, and the results do look great. They really do.
No, absolutely. So this brings into the next part here, and Stefan, I want to start with you on this. Obviously, everyone sees this. The fashion industry is alive. Film, really brands. They all have the attention now that Afterworld has come out, and they're out there listening now, thinking, how do I get into the game? How can I take my brand? How can I bring what we do into this universe? So, Stefan, what do you think they need to start doing in order to be prepared to enter into this new world of enterprise video games, metaverse? What should be their first step to start making this way across the channel?
Well, I think the key is to first have confidence in this new technology that is actually not going to be as abstract and bizarre and different than maybe they think it is, right? That let's say if you're coming from the fashion industry or the film industry, they have a lot of stagecraft, right? They do know how to entertain. They do know how to connect with a certain type of audience, right? They might not be initially video gamers, but they don't have to be, right? So their skills they'll actually transfer much more than they think, right? I think Sallyann mentioned it earlier that the Balenciaga piece felt like a show from the fashion industry because of the pacing, the way that was presenting itself, right? And that is sort of the point that you can see where a confident creator will transcend sort of this barrier of video game technology and will just simply create what represents their IP in this new format, right? So I would say that for brands that want to engage with this is they do have to understand that it's something that will build on what they have and where their skills will transfer, but they also cannot be afraid of trying new things and that they will have to learn things, and especially that there will be sometimes very unfamiliar technological limits, right? Sort of like you can make it look good on one phone, but you can't make it look good on this other phone that is slightly different shape. Why is that so difficult? Well, there are many reasons, right? Uh, why that might take a lot more time, so the willingness to learn about how to make it work and finding creative solutions that still communicate the essence of what they're trying to achieve, that is going to get the brands, I think, really, really far, right? A willingness to have a conversation gets really far. And, hopefully not underestimating that this is essentially a software engineering project, right? Whatever you call it in terms of this engine or that data, it is very complex, kind of high throughput software engineering with a lot of moving parts, and uh, prepare for it properly. Now, I'm not familiar very well with the fashion industry itself, how long it takes to design an entire new round of clothing styles or like designs. But I would imagine that this is not something that is done in any less than 6 months. It's probably more like a year, 2 years, maybe longer. I'm not sure, but there's a concept stage, there's a production stage. Then there is, okay, revealing it, showing it, in a certain way, have a certain, way of presenting it. That also is true in the game space, if you will, or making these applications. There are pre-production stages, preparation stages, planning stages. You don't have to emulate everything about Balenciaga. That's what I'm saying, because it was a very short, very short timeline, right? Super short. So that is possible, but it comes at a cost for the teams when you do it always that short, and it doesn't have to be. Plan, prepare, learn essentially about the interactivity you do want to achieve, and understand that there's going to be many flavors in how you can do interactivity and express that, from essentially more or less an interactive movie that is very linear and like there's no interaction, to a completely immersive open world experience, and anything in between. And authenticity and creativity really does make the difference in how you present something. So it's a weird mix of technology and creativity, and understanding that from any brand's perspective is going to be important.
Simon, let me ask you the same question. I mean, how can the brands get in there? How can, the different fashion houses come in? What would you advise them?
That's a great question. I mean, there's some amazing work been done, across the fashion industry. There's exploring the combination of, the XR, mixed reality, and the use of real-time engines. We've got another production actually launching this week, which is pretty exciting for the fashion world as well. So I think there's a lot of people taking notice and doing good work in this space. I think a great example of another sector that, in particular, Unreal Engine has, worked closely with across the ecosystem to help fuel is that of, within film and TV for virtual production, in terms of, raising awareness of the possibilities, working with different stakeholders across the ecosystem to help, identify where things can be improved, how people can work more closely. Collaboration in this space is absolutely key right now. And I think that's where a lot of the innovation is happening. If you look in the world of fashion in particular, you've got from virtual try-ons and AR fashion filters and configurators, to the XR and, mixed reality fashion shows that we're seeing. I think great creatives and bold creatives are, they understand or are starting to understand the possibilities of these technologies, and they're starting to experiment. And, a bit like the old adage, great stories find a way to come through. I think it still comes down to the idea that you're leveraging these technologies, but with really powerful stories to tell, that consumers and audiences want to engage with. So I think there's definitely work to be done, but I think the creatives in the space and technologists in the space are really starting to push the boundaries, explore the possibilities, and that's noticeable. I think just in the last 18 months, and we understand some of the reasons for that in a world where virtual and connective technologies have become more important. That's kind of pushed the agenda a bit, but that's fantastic, and in particular for the world of fashion, where I think creatively there are endless possibilities in how you can play and experiment with fashion, how you can engage people, and how you can tell those brand stories, how you can conceive those virtual worlds, and the crazy stuff that perhaps we thought of or read about in sci-fi books and watched in films, but didn't necessarily think was going to come to the fore. We had another great example this week with Microsoft Mesh, in terms of another step towards the metaverse, and the fact that shared virtual experiences with holoportation now becomes possible. I mean, that really is living in the future, right? So it's an exciting space.
Oh, absolutely. So Sallyann, brands coming to you saying, help me.
Yes.
I wanna do this. What do they do? Where do they go? I mean, how do they start? Obviously the technology is a big place.
Mhm.
Unreal.
Yeah.
That's what they know. Fortnite, Unreal. I mean, those are the words. So
Yeah.
what would you advise them?
People I talk to fall into two categories. Yeah, often fall into two categories. From the brand side, they sometimes, and I do not mean this in a derogatory way in any way. They sometimes know enough to be dangerous, and they sometimes know nothing. And I think that the knowing some allows you to know the endless possibilities, and it's a little bit overwhelming. It's like, my gosh, game engine technology can allow for, you know 10, 20, 30 different types of experiences, different types of executions, different types of connecting and connections. And it can go all the way through from design through to the expression of a show through to e-commerce. And I think sometimes it's overwhelming. And so often it's just taking a step back and being a little bit more strategic about your first few steps into this sort of more digitally focused space. And then for the guys that know very little, it's about letting it in. It's about looking at all these amazing examples that we have out in the ecosystem now. Balenciaga being one of the best. Also, potentially allowing your eyes to wander into what's been done before in architecture and maybe even in automotive, and it won't be pleasing to a fashion eye, but it will start to unpick and unfold the possibilities and how that can be applied to your business. But I think as Simon said, it still relies on great ideas. It still relies on great, creative, talented people. And so it's just having a knowledge base of what's possible with these tools. And they are just tools that, it's tech, and there's a level of demystification that's needed, but they're just tools that anyone in the industry, if they've got a little bit of knowledge, can pick up and run with. And that's not necessarily people sitting on a computer and running with, but just allowing them to be part of their creative direction, allowing them to be part of their creative stimulation and the big idea, and it flows through the piece that they're creating. So there's a lot of knowledge and research and understanding to be done and being done, which is great. And then really it's just sort of being a little bit more strategic about what you do. Now, making a choice. One good idea. Take some forward steps into one good idea and do it really, really well.
So one of the things that I'm seeing on this end as well regarding just more enterprise usage here is a understanding of vocabulary. And I think this is something that, Sallyann, we've had a conversation about this before, and I think it really does bear to be spoken about from the standpoint that it isn't enough just to basically, no, just enough to be dangerous, and it's not enough just to be, say, completely ignorant towards it, but it's to basically find a way to form a language between the various industries and the different participants that want to come into this space and would like to be able to flourish with it. So one thing that I'm curious about here, and this is going to be open to all of you, really, is how do we find a way to effectively communicate, to have that one level of communication that where people understand what certain things mean, like what is the metaverse, what is volumetric video, the digital avatars, the way people should embrace the communication. What do you guys think about that? Is this a place where we need to set standards? Do we need to create the lexicon ourselves and then bring everyone in, or is it just a free for all? I'm curious on how you guys look at that.
Shall I go? I'll go.
Yeah, go for it.
Look, I think you're right. We have chatted about it, and I think it's really important, and it must never be forgotten. It's really simple. If you want to talk to someone, you need to know their languages. Their language, their challenges, their desires, what represents success for them, and I think the fashion industry has historically worked with the fashion industry, and it could, because it was very sort of hands-on production, hands-on craft, and now it is being made aware of a digital industry, a create tech industry, and lots of different new tools that live in a 3D world, and a different language is spoken in this world, or definitely a version of our languages is spoken in this world. And so there has to be a coming together. The first, I think it's going to take a while for actual language to cross over, but it will happen, and it will happen from there being multiple experiences in this environment. And in the meantime, I think we really, really have to leverage one of the powerful aspects of this type of work, which is that it's so visual. What's so wonderful about working in a 3D real-time environment is that you can get great visuals really quick. And that's not been possible even in a fashion environment until now. Definitely not in a VFX environment. Design, any creative process has been linear, and so I think we need to invite all creative leads into this very visual 3D environment, and allow them to see. And I think that's the best way to break down the barriers is bring everyone in close and allow everyone to be able to visualize it and iterate and share and access. And that's what's so great about working within a 3D platform, working with 3D assets, but also working in a real-time environment, because it's also immediate and they don't have to surrender their disbelief, and they don't have to wait. It can be a much more collaborative experience. And then in the meantime, whilst we're holding hands and being collaborative and literally standing around the campfire, then I think that the more that different industries work together, the more there will naturally be crossover in the language, and there will naturally be a better understanding of challenges, and there'll just be a history and a legacy, and you'll have experience of each other. And so it will become so much easier and much more fluid.
Very well said. Simon, what do you think?
Wow, that's an awesome answer. I don't think I can follow that. I'll go with what Sallyann said. I think your point about building a lexicon and a consistent language, Alex, is really interesting. I think the industry, if you're talking about, for example, the immersive industry, I think we've done a great job collectively of building a lexicon that kind of means the same thing, but different parts of it mean different things to different people. We've got XR, we've got VR, we've got AR, we've got MR, we've got immersive, we've got spatial computing. I mean, the list goes on, but in many ways, they're one and the same, or they're the same, different sides of the same coin. So I don't think the industry, from an immersive point of view, has helped itself to a certain level. But I do think that experiencing what the possibilities are and experiencing what the content is really helpful. And a good example of that would be virtual reality. When virtual reality, started to pick up on the hype cycle again a few years back, a lot of people had an expectation or a perception of what VR might be. Some of those people were spot on. Other people, it wasn't really until they actually put a headset on and experienced what it really meant to be fully immersed with agency in a virtual world of what actually virtual reality could do and could become. So I definitely think there's an element of you need to experience the possibilities to really understand them.
I totally agree with you, Simon. Not wanting to jump in and have another go, but I totally agree with you with consent to VR. I think that I really, really believe that VR is going in the future to be incredibly valuable to the fashion industry. Across the board, I think it will have its moment. It will come back to being a really significant sort of platform to visualize things. But I think especially for the fashion industry, having that, they're so emotionally driven, which is wonderful. I love it. And being immersed at scale in VR is such an emotional experience that you can't get from a screen, you can't get from TV, and you definitely can't get it from a document. And I think that once it is introduced more widely and used more widely, then I really don't think they'll ever go back. So I think if I was going to if I was going to say to my children to do anything, I'd say invest in VR for the fashion industry. It's going to be big.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's really interesting because if you think about the content that we're all creating, and in the case of Balenciaga, Afterworld, what that was, this is three-dimensional content, but it's content that exists in space and time. We're creating a new format. We're moving from 3D content, I think, into the land of 4D, right? Which means you can move through this content through space and time, and this content coexists, whether it's through augmented reality in the real world, whether in the future we are wearing eyewear and we're able to walk down the street and everything that you see is skinned in the style of Batman or whatever your favorite film is, to VR, which is the same. You're just in you're in an immersed space, you can't see the real world around you, and then to like the richness of the 3D worlds that Balenciaga and the Streamline guys created. You ultimately, that's immersive in the sense that you're traveling with agency through that space, through the world that Balenciaga conceived. And I think the real shift is that we're moving to a place where content is going to be volumetric. It's going to be volumetric by nature. It's going to be four-dimensional experiences, and new form factors, new technologies that underpin those are going to become more prevalent. And that's really exciting for storytellers and creatives. Children growing up now who are starting to learn about content creation and possibilities. In 10 years' time, I can only imagine what they'll be doing. It's just going to be phenomenal because engines such as Unreal Engine are making the creation process of that content easier and more adoptable.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think it's really exciting how the technology is kind of pushing innovation forward. And what I think is also going to be really interesting is I think it's going to be kind of like a more subtle evolution, or at least it'll be more nuanced. Like when you're looking at how games and in some sense visual effects have kind of been going for the definitely last, let's say 15 years, it's kind of sort of bigger is better, right? Just more polygons, more 3D, more of everything that you can throw at the screen. But in the future now, there's sort of like a saturation point in terms of pure visuals. In Simon's words, like three dimensions have been filled. Now we're going to focus on the fourth dimension and the social aspects and sort of the really enhancing the experience beyond just the visual showmanship. And I think that is going to really change what actually is going to be considered a product, or what is going to be entertainment. And for example, we've already seen that, for example, when we're looking at more VR applications, you have very different conversations about cognitive load of individuals. What do you need to do to avoid them getting maybe motion sick or nauseous like that? And what is too much on screen for someone? Not just looking at the TV screen, but being fully immersed. Your brain really remembers and experiences that quite different, right? Like you take off the headset, if you remember your experience in the VR world, your brain recollects it as if it just happened down the street, as if you were really there, right? And so there's going to be more responsibility about doing that right, and what kind of experiences are really going to be taking off. So I think it's going to really see different creators come to the forefront that not just understand maybe just sort of creativity and just let's try something radical, not just understand technology and like how to make something kind of optimized technologically wise, but really understand human beings and how they perceive things and how they kind of emotionally connect, and of course connect with each other. And if this all sounds a little bit, metaphysical, it's kind of like, because this is sort of right now beyond the boundaries of what really is an entertainment. But as everything becomes kind of online connected and more volumetric, you're going to see these things showing up together. And I think that is really interesting to see where the industry is going in the next just like 15 years in this regard.
So everyone here, you all each sit at an interesting part of the actually Metaverse Dream that is happening. Let's call it the Metaverse Dream. Effectively, this concept of effectively a digital persona, a physical persona becoming part of a unified reality, or effectively an IP that goes everywhere and anywhere. It's a big thing. So you know what? I want to crack this nut open. Sallyann, we're going to come to you first because you guys are the creators of the technology that enable pretty much all of this to happen. And I'm curious, what are you seeing? I mean, where is this going from your guys' opinion?
The metaverse concept is, as you say, it's a big thing. It's all things to all people. It's a tall order. It's not going to happen overnight. It's got to have accessibility, interactivity. It's got to have a high fidelity. And it's got to allow you to do all the things you want to do in the real world, and so many more. And it can't stop, and it needs to be created by a vast group of creative community members. So where do I see it going? Well, at the moment, a lot of the key elements of the metaverse exist in games. Fortnite being one of them, but there are others. There are lots of others. And you can already do lots of metaverse things. Let's say lots of just normal human things. You can hang out with your friends. You can watch shows. You can see films. You can be part of a huge creative community. In Fortnite, you can build your own island. And in other games, you can build your own places. You can be part of a robust economy and buy and sell things. But I think what's missing is the denseness and the diversity of that space. It's pockets at the moment, and the offering has to be all experiences, and and there has to be no cap on numbers, and so it can't just be one game. It can't just be sort of one platform. It has to be all platforms, and it has to be all games and every experience. And then when you finish, say for instance, you finish a game of Fortnite, and then you would just sort of test drive a Tesla, and it would be a very sort of natural progression. You wouldn't go out of one piece of software and go into another, or one application. So it has to be, it's all about, it relies on interconnectivity. The Unreal Engine is a piece of software that can help with this interconnectivity. It's an underlying interactive piece of software that can help bring all of these experiences together, these individual creative experiences together, so that you can begin to have a metaverse forming that is all things to all people, and that is events and games and businesses and creative expressions. And you can form a sort of a dense mesh of all the things that people want at any given time. So that's where I think it's going.
All right, Simon, let me ask you something. As a participant in this metaverse, what is it to you? Where do you see it? I mean, if for where you sit with what you do with Dimensions, I mean, you're effectively enabling the metaverse to happen, whether it's through the volumetric video you're capturing, or the actual digital humans, what you're creating. Tell us about that, and link yourself into this universe. How do you see this coming?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Alex. I'm picking up on what Sallyann said there. I think, the metaverse is coming, right? We've got all of the component parts which are in various stages of development. And I think what really excites me at the moment is we're seeing the convergence of different complementary technologies which are forming the foundation of the metaverse. Of course, real-time engines such as Unreal are, a primary part of that. But if you look at what's happening between a combination of technologies such as real-time engines and volumetric video, in the case of Balenciaga, that starts to touch on the possibilities for fashion brands within the metaverse. Okay, in the case of Balenciaga, it's a mini metaverse. It's their own virtual world that they've conceived. And then if you look at things like cloud streaming and 5G, which will enable, faster, richer content, computer vision and spatial audio, and the possibilities that start to emerge for, AR and MR and the true immersion that we'll get from that. All of these technologies are starting to intersect, and those different technology curves are overlapping. And when that happens, the magic starts to emerge. And I think that's what we're starting to see with the early foundations of the metaverse and the combination of those different technologies which we're working with today. So, the building blocks are coming. And in many ways, people are already engaging with a form of the metaverse. If you think about the metaverse as an evolution of digital and social as we use it today, the idea of distributed identity, I think, we're starting to take those steps into what the metaverse will become. And of course, the technologies will power that, and that will happen over time. But it's a really exciting time for us as content creators and as technologists that work with volumetric technologies, such as the Microsoft mixed reality capture system. Starting to bring those into real-time engines, into Unreal Engine, and to explore the creative possibilities. Specifically within fashion, in the case of Balenciaga, we just started to scratch the surface of what those are. It's really exciting.
Oh, that's amazing. Stefan, care to add anything on that?
This isn't something that is so obvious to a lot of game developers just yet, because game development has been oftentimes kind of isolated, there's sort of a tribalness to it, or just simply working in a box for, maybe decades. And what's now happening is, this term metaverse, I think can also kind of describe that it's just simply a blending of all of these industries kind of happening together now, expressing their craft. And, you have filmmakers now using, Unreal technology, game technology. You have a whole different category of designers entering the game space. I think we haven't even yet seen really how this is going to, for example, kind of like increase or enhance kind of like sort of the player expectations. Like, for example, Balenciaga has a real, fashion designer behind it, right? Like in the project we did. And, what happens if those designers are getting more comfortable just contributing to game projects in general? Or if you have, high quality fashion designers that work on a movie production, simultaneously, get those costumes scanned, and they just become part of the interactive experience that might come out with a movie, right? So you have, a kind of an increase in skill set in video games in the next coming years, just simply because these skill sets already exist right now, but are now essentially becoming accessible very naturally for game developers, right? So this blending is going to happen, and from a player or a viewer's perspective, they're not going to like necessarily even call this anything or really know what is going on, but they will, I think, just simply subconsciously their expectations will grow. They're like, well, the fashion in that game, or like the set design in that game or in that movie, like wasn't quite up to snuff, right? So they will push on it, right? First they've pushed on it maybe with television has become so really great looking, right? Like with we look at like a Netflix or Disney Plus or something. I mean, they look like movies did just 10 years ago, right? And I think we don't talk about that, but that same effect is probably going to happen to games, right? Where like production values will just go up, and just naturally that happens because players will just expect that, right? And so they will kind of inform each other. And in the same way, like if you're using game technology to make your movies, then having interactive spin-offs, from there, also makes a lot of sense. And to me, personally, and Alex knows this, I've been sort of like pushing on the volumetric video angle already for a couple of years. I'm like, it's coming. I can see it. It just makes too much sense. You're talking to people in the movie industry, and they're like, I mean, we'd love to just you build the set, but then you tore it down yesterday. What are you going to do? Well, I have a scanned version of it that is actually a really great starting place. And even just like looking at the volumetric captures we've done that we received from Dimension and used, like you can see where it's going, where it's like if I'm directing a scene and I've done my blocking and my cinematography, but afterwards the director is like, I need to change the layout a little bit. If I can move my actors around in the scene and it's all perfectly recorded and recoverable, I mean that will change filmmaking at one point, right? I mean, now the resolution isn't quite there, and people will kind of say like, you can see the polygons, or it gets kind of weird and jittery, but like just give it some time and it's eventually going to be perfect, right? And when that moment comes, I think you're again going to see another round of a new generation of filmmakers and developers be empowered that can make high quality content that would have been unimaginable at that small budget, that they can do things at, right? So it's a very exciting time, right? And it's only going to go more high quality and faster from here.
So as we're winding towards the conclusion of this podcast, I want to ask you all, if you had one thing that you could give to make a successful metaverse or fashion collab or any form of basically enterprise game to be successful with multiple parties, what would that be? And I know that this is a lot. It's a big question, but think about the one thing that you think that would help people to make this very successful. So, Simon, I say your name first, so I'm going to go to you first. What do you think that would be?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alex. I suppose from Dimension's perspective, we're working hard to advance the kind of state of the art for the volumetric capture, and ultimately that's related to digital humans. It's that idea of being able to create versions of yourself that exist in those spaces with distributed identity. So that's the one thing that we are focused on as a company, alongside the work we do in virtual worlds and virtual production. So that would be the one thing I think at the moment where we are we're scaling that capability. We're introducing it to new companies. They're starting to adopt the content and understand the way in which it can be used and played with. I think that's got a key part to play in the future future metaverse landscape, if you like.
Stefan?
I think it's really investing in the collaboration tools and technologies that are maybe let's call it the not cool part of the production, right? Like, how do we talk to each other? How do we make decisions? Like, because some people kind of they walk in with the wrong expectations. I think Sallyann sort of alluded to this, that people think like, oh, I play games, or like, I've used the Unreal Engine. Like, the human factor that precedes all of that is just still, people have to talk to each other in boring Zoom calls and agree on how to put this all together. So in that regard, honestly, the technology is going to advance faster than human habits of collaboration. So my suggestion will be, really focus in having a really good team internally that is ready for external collaboration, because that's what you're going to have to do. companies are not going to be able to bring all of this knowledge in-house. And we talk about this sort of like very naturally, like, well, the tech is going to be there, and it'll make magic happen for everyone. But your company, as a customer's company, or like to say any brand that wants to engage with this, they need to really decide how they want to engage with other companies to make this happen. Who are the internal stakeholders? How do they communicate externally? Uh, what authority do the people have that are interfacing with the outside? Because it's about effective decision making. Because all this technology and the people, like our companies, we're not going to come for free, right? Like our time is going to be valuable, and we need to find a way to collaborate effectively. And so, on this call, we've said a lot about like how amazing the tech is and how fast everything is moving. And I just want to I would really kind of qualify to people like the tech is amazing, and in the right hands you can do amazing things, but you can also really fall on your face because you may assume that the tech will do the work for you. Like there's one button in the Unreal Engine, make awesome, right? Like it doesn't work like that. And so I think we introduce some of these because we're entering sort of like a hype moment. I think we're going to reintroduce some of that preconceived notion. Well, the Unreal Engine can do it, real time. Just press a button and models pop out in amazing resolution. Right? It's like no, there's a limit how many and what they can do and how long it takes. So I would temper that a little bit if I saw that.
Sallyann.
I would incorporate a button that said "Make Awesome" and put it in the middle of the metaverse. I think kind of leveraging a little bit what both Stefan and Simon have said in a way. I think that the development of one's digital self is such a powerful step in the direction of the metaverse. We're really good at creating space and creating events and environments. But I think now, in order for the metaverse to be a meaningful place, it has to have identity. And therefore its inhabitants have to have identity. And so starting with oneself is the most perfect place to begin. And then I think that it's really important that it has tools, creative tools, so that everyone can express themselves and can create a metaverse that is an expression of themselves. So, creating an environment where we can all be present, however we want to be present, how we want to look, how we want to exist, how we want to feel, but then also having an environment where the community can easily be part of the building blocks, be part of the creation, so that everyone has a vested interest. It has to be a place that people want to be. Who wouldn't want to be within their own endeavors, their own creation? So, I think, make it about the community, make it about a creative space.
Well, I want to go ahead and get all our social tag shout outs there. So, Simon, how can people find out more about Dimensions, website, Twitter, LinkedIn? Where can we go for you?
Dimensions website, dimensionstudio.co. And you can search us by Dimension Studio on Twitter and Insta.
I'm not very good at handles and things like that. Ultimately, unrealengine.com.
Everyone go to unrealengine.com so you can find out more about that. Stefan, what about us? What social, where can people go to find out more about Streamline and all that jazz?
So for Alex and myself, Streamline Media Group is really active on LinkedIn right now. As you go there, you'll find sort of this family of brands under our umbrella that is really sharing a lot about our culture and our projects there right now. So I would recommend going there. So Streamline Media Group, or if you want to go to the website, it's streamline-mediagroup.com. Very much announcements happening there. Actually, in fact, this week there's a bunch of stuff dropping there. Otherwise, from my personal handle on Twitter is Nerdy Narrative. You'll find me there. A little bit less corporate, maybe.
All right. Well, Sallyann, Simon, Stefan, I want to thank you all for coming on to Video Games Real Talk this week. It's been a really informative discussion. If anything, it was actually very entertaining. I appreciate your guys' time. And of course, for all of our listeners out there, if you want to know more, please go ahead and follow us on Twitter, Video Games Real Talk. You can hit us up on Twitter as well at StarvUp or at Nerdy Narrative. And of course, as always, go to videogamesrealtalk.com and join the conversation. And of course, there will be more on the metaverse, more on enterprise gaming, more on entertainment gaming, and of course, just video games in general, because that's what Video Games Real Talk is all about. Again, thank you, Simon, Sallyann, Stefan. I know it's been a journey. Thank you for bearing all the technical difficulties that we had, but your expertise was really appreciated, and I hope and wish all of you guys continued success.